Today is 5th of June, 2025. What day is it then, Janet?
World Environment Day. World Environment Day.
Hey, well done, Janet. Well done. With the hashtag World Environment Day. And it has a theme every year on what happens with the environment. So it's a global celebration marking environment and what happens. And we're going to have our next conversation with somebody who is an advocate for climate. Youth climate advocate, Kaluki Paul Mutuku. Good morning.
Good morning, Latif.
How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. How are you all?
You're good, thanks.
We're well.
Yeah.
What's an appropriate environment-friendly greeting?
Right. You can tell us. I guess it's Happy World Environment Day.
You're environmentally sane. That's good.
You're environmentally sane.
Yes.
Okay.
You say...
And then you answer?
What's the reply?
Yes, sir, you are sane.
I'm sane.
Yes.
Sane.
Okay.
So you're environmentally sane.
I'm sane.
Okay. You're environmentally sane.
I'm sane.
Interesting.
What does that mean?
Just means that you're one with nature, and you are living the principles of nature. I always like to say that humanity has been given one role by the Creator. Is to be stewards of creation and stewards of conservation. So if you are doing your little thing to conserve and take care of the environment, you are sane. You are one with nature.
It's a call to action.
That's a good one. That just goes right into the quote.
Right into the quote.
Right.
Right. Zora Neale Hurston once said, there are years that ask questions and years that answer. Where do you think we are? Do you think we still have many questions, or do you think we're getting closer to answers?
My goodness, we have many questions.
So you're still in questions?
We have many questions. And truly, because as you look at the current trajectory when it comes to climate action, we are not doing so much to solve the crisis. We are not doing so much to even finance and resource communities. We are not doing so much to actually help evacuate communities that are really bearing the brunt and the impact of the climate crisis. So we are in the years to really question ourselves and introspect on that which we can do better to heal our environment and in the end heal ourselves.
We'll get into that because I think it's important to relate this conversation to everybody who's watching or listening, because a lot of the time, and we've said this before, climate change, climate justice has often been seen, there's been seen as a disconnect, right? That it's very global north lingo, very technical, but we do bear the biggest brunt, right? And this year's theme is ending plastic pollution. Where are we with that? I feel like at some point we were onto something, ban plastic bags, but I'm seeing some data here from, ecotourismkenya.org and globalissues.org that Kenya generates 22,000 tons, but that's of waste, with plastic accounting for 20% of this total. Annual plastic waste estimates indicate that Kenya produces between 0.5 to 1.3 million tons of plastic waste daily. And according to kpp.or.ke, recycling rates, only about 8% of plastic waste is recycled. The remaining waste is either landfilled, incinerated, or ends up polluting the environment. But where are we, Kaluki, when it comes to plastic pollution?
Well, just to say that Kenya has made some significant steps in addressing the issue of plastic pollution. I'm really happy that this year the theme is ending plastic pollution. And one of the slogans that I'm really proud of is nurture nature, nurture life. And plastics are really a big culprit in ensuring that we don't nurture life. But where does it come from? It comes from humankind, our activities, oil explorations, and really the investments in an obsolete source of power. So for us, of course, we made some steps to even actualize and enact the plastic ban. It's almost over 5 years now, and I really think that was a big call to action. That as a country, we saw that we were choking in this climate bias and chaos because of plastic pollution. And then put in place that measure. And remember, before then, Kenya had tried severally to put this plastic ban since 2014, I think. We had failed terribly, but I feel as we go back to how the then Minister of Environment, Judy Wahungu, really came in as a leader to see to it that the government actually puts this as a national call to action was really inspiring. In 2020, we are witnesses that Kenya further reinforced that ban by, prohibiting entry of plastic bottles and materials into green parks. So for me, I see that as a step towards the right direction. But I'm also reminded of the current chaos that we see in the country. Kenya has banned, but how about our neighbors? We still have porous borders. We have entry points of these plastics from Busia and many other, borders that surround our country. Coming back to Nairobi, we know we are living in a time bomb. Dandora dam site is there. And every day it's actually growing into a mountain, but a mountain of despair. Because imagine informal communities that are in that slum, they have to deal with that current stage every day. They have to deal with that, the noise, the birds that are there to feed on the waste, but also the health risks that are posed to these communities. So yes, Kenya has made some progress, but I feel we still have a long way to go. It's not enough for us to just enact or put these bans. How do we follow through, and how do we ensure that the citizen actually leads? It's not government enforcing and making us subject to a law, but it's the citizen actually taking initiative and ensuring that we are creating a better world for, I think, that can make the theme for this year a better call to action.
Right. I'm usually kind of a sourpuss when it comes to issues climate change and discussing Kenya and Africa's role, because I'm just very cognizant of the fact that there's very little we can do that could reverse anything significant as far as global warming. There's nothing we can do except lobby, right? There's only 2-3 countries that have the actual power to change that. And that's, I think it's just a fact. So then I wonder, every climate action that we take, we take it for ourselves, because we love our environment and it's a good thing, of course. I'm not saying you go and pollute just because it doesn't affect change. But then I wonder, how can we be more consequential in the actual fight against climate change? Because for me, that change is not happening here. It's not happening in Mount Forest. It's a water catchment area for us. It's important. But for global temperatures, that fight is happening in China and the US. So I'm like, how can we be more consequential, truly?
Wow. That gives me a lot of thoughts and points to contribute to, and I'm sure if I talk for a whole day. But just to start off this particular response, we should know that on May 21st, Kenya launched our early warnings for all initiative. And actually that is as a result of a clarion call by the United Nations Secretary General's, call to really set up an initiative globally that helps communities to, first understand the risk that the climate is posing on us, then have early warning systems that can really help them access information in advance, take precautionary actions, and in terms of communicating what really is impacting them, the potential the gender story, and then how we can cushion ourselves and take actions on that. So that, I think, is a good step on the right direction. Also, our own president is actually appointed by Antonio Guterres as the global champion of early warnings for all. And this goes to just show the importance of the climate action that is needed at a national level, regional level, and global level. So as we think of it, the climate crisis is not a distant enemy. It's a constant daily reality for many people. I mean, just to give you some context, in 2024 floods, that over 410,000 people were impacted. And for those of us who live in this city of ours, Nairobi, people would actually, I think at some point there was this, people were bringing boats to really move around in this city, those who are driving, some of the cars were really destroyed and all this. And it shows the impact of the climate crisis, So for a city like Nairobi, that we know from that particular flooding event, about 315 lives were lost. And I always tell people, one life lost is one too many. And the climate crisis is literally eating us alive. And if we don't act now, we are really set for failure. In terms of loss, how much do you lose from that flooding effect? To a tune of 187 billion Kenya shillings. That is a lot of money. Think about the infrastructure that was destroyed, the deaths to these people. Their houses also destroyed. So it meant having to relocate them, to start afresh. And all this really shows as the manifestations of the climate crisis. And the point is this: we can all act. We have something we can do. If it's Mariam's storytelling and hosting this conversation, that is your action. If it's Eric's engaging with the communities on advocacy, that is his action. If it's Janet's really going to do the landscape restoration and communicating with the communities on how to really evacuate themselves and create better systems to protect them from the impacts of the climate crisis, then that is your action. And that is where the hope lies. We have to be hopeful, and we have to really be proud of the small actions that we are doing at a personal level and at a community level.
I think that's a very important point to make, just in terms of individual responsibility. I wonder whether these voices, when you go into some of these big rooms, are they A, listening to young voices? B, are they listening to community voices? Because the people most affected oftentimes aren't even in these conversations. I know now there's a push, they're calling it indigenous voices. We'll call it that for the sake of this conversation. So they realized, by they, I mean, I'm talking about Global North, I'm talking about the continents and countries that have led this conversation and over time realized, oh, okay, if these countries and communities are hard hit, I suppose it would be great to integrate them. Is it tokenistic, Kaluki, or do you feel like they're listening?
First of all, that term indigenous voices is finishing me, because indigenous to what's the earth?
Yes.
It's only aliens who'd be excluded from the conversation. We're all indigenous to the
natives.
Of a specific place. Okay.
Is there a better term?
Native.
Because that's true. No, it's fair.
Yeah.
But I just wonder whether
I feel like all of us are first descendants of this planet, but also future ancestors. And we really have to recognize ourselves as indigenous people of this planet and this amazing Earth, by the way, the only livable planet, you know, as the Elon Musks are going to Mars and other planets to explore life. I feel we still need to invest more in creating a better heaven here on Earth and ensuring that we do not really destroy our only livable planet at the expense of, oh, I have the money, I can explore outer space and really create another life out there. But to answer your question, Janet, is it tokenistic? Are people being meaningfully engaged? Are farmers being heard? Are women being heard? Are African youth being heard? I'm really grateful that we have come a long way, especially in the international climate negotiations. Of course, from 1992, even 1972, when the Rio conventions were made, it was a very government-led process, or what you'll call bilateral. And so back then, it's only government delegations who are allowed to go to these negotiation rooms. But then we have seen how it has evolved. Women were given access, civil society was given access, even media were given access much later. And to me, it speaks to the progress being made. And recently we've seen, especially the rise of the Fridays for Future movement and the climate advocacy across Africa, that actually young people are being listened to. Why? One, because world leaders, and I think that is not tokenistic, they are realizing, one, we are growing old, our energy is not as much as we had back then, and then it's these young people who are going to inherit this planet. It's the communities in Africa, in Latin America, Southeast Asia, who are being worst hit and impacted by the climate crisis. So if we do not make room for them to come and tell us how things are at the grassroots levels, if we do not give them opportunities to actually come and contribute to the negotiation, then we are missing the mark. And true to it, I've seen, especially from COP25 in Spain, I've at least attended all the climate conferences until COP29. I've seen how the youth voice is incrementally being welcomed in and how young people are actually influencing the decision making. In fact, when you talk about nature-based solutions, I think from the Glasgow COP26, young people actually undertook a whole global consultation to influence the then nature-based solutions policy, because it excluded young people, it excluded the role of indigenous people and local communities, and also excluded farmers and grassroots communities who are really leading in the efforts to restore our ecosystems and take climate action. So we literally engaged on this policy consultation and literally took it to the COP. And it has been adopted. In fact, right now, the UN has used it a lot of time. They have referenced our policy document, and it shows the power of community, the power of young people, and that we're not just naive. We're not just there to be seen. We are there to be heard, and our contribution matters. And I think there's more that we can do as well. Because, and this will be my last intervention at this point, even as young people are really pushing for recognition, there's a lot of structural role and systemic barriers. Last year, personally, I had to actually finance myself to go to a climate conference, and imagine having to, churn about $5,000 to just allow yourself to be in a space. That is a lot of money. We can invest in better ways, but some of us have to do it because, the moment we miss out on that decision-making table, our agenda is actually lost. And our leaders are very cunning and say, is it a monkey or what? So there is just, the moment you're not in the room, they will just cut you off from the conversations.
If you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Exactly. And so I think we need to resource young people and communities. We need to create more meaningful spaces for them to express themselves. And most importantly, we need to listen to them, because the stories that they bring to the global stages are stories on what is happening at the grassroots level, are stories about how a farmer, because of the climate chaos, droughts or floods, is actually being forced to not have better harvest. It's stories about how kids cannot go to school because the bridges have been, broken by floods, or locust invasion has actually rendered their food systems, insecure, and so they cannot eat. So do they choose education, or do they choose to look for food? For me, those conversations are very important.
They are.
At a national level, are we aware of what is happening and what we are also doing? Because yes, there's the global warming, global conversation, the ozone layer, this and the other, but then we are cutting trees.
Yeah, I was going to say.
We're the ones who are dumping garbage everywhere, right? Aided and abetted by government, because it does not provide proper waste management practices. We're the ones who are not harvesting water when water comes and goes.
Yes.
Are we having those conversations about, the things that are just at our local level? Now that we're talking about communities and grassroots, are we doing that? Are indigenous people doing indigenous things?
Latif, you'll be surprised that actually, since time immemorial, these indigenous people, these local communities, have actually been doing the real action. And maybe this does not come as a shock, but in fact, everything our governments and our climate negotiators communicate globally is a result of what is happening at the grassroots level. I've not seen my president going to lead a whole restoration, at least on the ground. I've not seen our members of parliament going to clean the rivers. I've not seen our ministers going to actually resource the communities at the grassroots level to do 1, 2, 3. It's the people who take the agency and actually bring about change. I went on a trip to northern Kenya, Marsabit, and those areas, and I was just struck because as you talk about the 15 billion trees by 2032, you imagine communities in northern Kenya. These people don't have the luxury of planting trees because, number one, water is a scarce resource for them. So do they choose to plant trees, water them, or do they choose to actually find for water to, for cooking and domestic use? And to them, they have designed a very innovative approach. They call it farmer-managed natural regeneration. In short, it's FMNR. So simply put, FMNR in these arid areas, they actually take care of the indigenous acacias and different indigenous trees that grow naturally in their landscapes. They prune them, they take care of it, and actively conserve so that they can then grow into forests. And that shows you the power of these communities. They know what is happening. They know we cannot naturally grow trees here, but through planting, of course, but we can take care of what is naturally growing and really have the minimal inputs into them so that we can have a forest. So you could ask me, then do they still qualify to the 15 billion? I'm like, yes, we need to do that. We need to see them for this role, and we need to actually engage them. They need to be brought at the table because their actions matter. Take an example of communities in Ukambani, where we've heard about food insecurities, people dying and all that, when it's drought seasons. But on the same farmer-managed natural regenerations, these communities are actually practicing agroforestry as a way to first promote restoration, and then also grow high-yielding crops that are nutritious to their children, to their community. And in this way, through the communities we've visited, you see how nature is literally getting back because of the efforts of these communities. Most of them, you'll likely be surprised, Latif, they're not even educated formally, but they know these are the trees that have actually been resilient in our ecosystems. Right. And by taking care of them, by nurturing them, we are actually building resilience for ourselves. And this amounts to climate action. So yes, communities are doing work, and we need to encourage them.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's very true. So they're doing what they've always done.
Yes.
Yeah.
With the knowledge that we've always had. The problem is at some point we started discarding that knowledge and going to something else. So my question is, are these things happening at scale at community level? Because if they're happening at scale at community level, then we'd be seeing the county governments now coming in with the budgets to support and continue to enhance this, and we'll be seeing a big growth.
Yeah.
I'm basically asking, is it at scale or is it those small projects that we use in reports?
It's a mix of both. One, that those small pocket projects that are happening that I still think is important. And remember, my first intervention was we also need those small actions, because it's from the small actions that we get inspiration to even scale. And through these communities, we can learn, But then also, it's at scale, because think of Kenya with this FLOCA model, the financing locally led climate financing. Actually, through World Bank, our county governments are now resourced to be able to disburse climate budgets to help communities fund their climate projects, their food systems projects, and therefore create the scale that we need. So I am convinced that Kenya is growing, and we're increasing the reach to the extent that we can really scale these climate projects. But can more be done? Definitely.
Yeah.
And it's a subject of a factor of financing, of course,
I'm happy that you brought in FLOCA, just for everybody's understanding what is FLOCA.
Yes, so FLOCA is ideally, these are climate funds that are supposed to help locally led climate actions. And think of it as, the impacts that communities are facing.
Start with climate. The acronym.
FLOCA is financing locally led climate action. FLOCA, And so through World Bank support, of course, the Kenyan government who have designed this program really are creating a special budget to help communities, support their climate projects, the adaptation projects with this particular financing, so that they can really then take action and adapt to their worst changing climate impacts. Then two, they also contribute to climate mitigation. And climate mitigation in this case, think about the tree growing initiatives, think about the blue economy, think about all things we talk about restoration. So a mix of those two things are what the climate financing for locally led actions is actually coming in to support. And the Kenyan government has actually been a good case study that is being studied across the world to bring about how we can localize climate financing models to help communities transition and adapt to the changing climate crisis.
How can we localize?
How can we localize?
You said how to localize resourcing.
So
what does that look like?
Yeah, how does it look like? So for the case of FLOCA, there are these county committees that are very integrated. So we have the village elders, we have the farmers themselves, we have young people and women who actually come into these corporations or groups. They organize themselves, they create a project, and then they submit these proposals. It's these proposals that are then vetted and then, financed. So for me, I feel going to the local level, hearing what the people's challenges are, resonating with them, and help them to package the project better in a way that we can then scale from what Latif was talking about, then presents a big opportunity. Because for the longest time, we've heard about, aid money that comes to communities, and then midway, this money gets lost. And you ask yourself, where does it go? I'll give you an answer. It goes to some of the big boys and girls, and it finances their cars, their posh apartments. And by the time the project is coming to an end, all the money has been squandered. But then the most interesting thing for me has been when you look at the impact reports, oh my goodness, they praise how transformative the community was, how this money has helped the people. But you go to the grassroots level, you still see them ravishing in this poverty, and you ask yourself, to what extent can this? Exactly.
So I feel back on that. That's why I'm saying. Even as you say FLOCA and all, and Kenya is a case study. Kwa ground,
mambo ni tofauti,
completely different. How many counties have actually properly established those committees? Because they're supposed to establish those local committees, and those local committees are the ones that determine what they need to do with that money. How long have counties taken to just establish those committees?
Well,
if it was community led, if we were saying that communities are participating, then these things would have happened very easily. Because there'd be structures that are already in place, and county governments would know what wanajua, so we can't play around. The reason why counties have been taking so long is because they're trying to find ways of playing games with this money, so the money ends up into where we know the money ends up.
And in fact,
which is why I was asking Kaluki. Are communities actually doing these things?
Latif, the communities are doing these things. The only mismatch is like what you're saying. I feel there's that aspect of there's a disconnect from policymakers and what the people are doing. And at times the process seems to really take so long, and not respecting the fact that the impacts are hitting us now and here. What I'm really proud of the FLOCA model is that at least a good number of the counties have really been engaged. There are a few, like you're saying, that have had this very rat and cat kind of game, and they're trying to sneak in some projects that are not meant to be for the community. But those have been, churned out. I will not mention some counties, but there's a particular county whose proposal and participation in FLOCA was literally ousted out because they were trying to play these rat and cat mouse games. And of course, the government and stakeholders saw, and they're like, no, we really need to move forward with people who are very intentional and they have real scalable projects. I do feel like we need to...
You know what gives me the same vibe as what Eric is saying? Carbon credits.
I was just going to ask, what's his thought on the carbon credit debate and debacle?
It's big name, big numbers involved, big corporates, but first of all, climate tool or just capitalist hoax?
I mean, look at it this way. I feel, for me, the focus should really be on abating and cutting emissions, direct emissions from the source, and especially from industrialized countries. Think of solutions like renewable energy. Think about financing climate mitigation and climate adaptation. Think about working with the local groups and communities that are really leading on community-led conservation efforts. One thing that this does, if we check or tend to look at it that way, is it helps the finances to flow down to the communities and allows them to actually engage in equitable and effective climate mitigation measures. And remember, like I said, the climate crisis is hitting now and here. And I don't want to talk much about the carbon markets controversies, but we know, for those who engage in this discussion, you have to wait for at least some years, maybe 10, 15 years. So are you telling a farmer who is in some rural place that are only, dependent on this wood for charcoal, you have to conserve this tree for like 10, 15 years, and then lose on that livelihood that you've been having on depending on any day. And then when you look at the return on investment for them, it simply does not make sense. So for me, is this, let us shift the focus to cutting emissions from the source, and especially for industrialized countries. Allow me to give you a very interesting analogy here. I'll call it the sheet analogy. The sheet analogy goes like this. So imagine, and I'll use the example of three of you, Janet and Latif are a community that is upstream in a particular mountain. Then Mariam and myself are really living downstream. So Janet and Latif decides to just, sheet and do every...
Defecate.
I thought it was an acronym.
I even thought it was sheet. So let's say defecation analogy.
Defecation analogy. So they choose to defecate, and for over time, their effects really go downstream. But the communities at the grassroots, at the downstream level, start manifesting diarrhea, typhoid, and all these kind of, diseases that they cannot understand. What does Janet and Latif decide to do? Because they are the so-called quote-unquote messiahs, they choose to go downstream, visit Kaluki and Mariam, and tell us, oh, actually your problem is that you've not built good schools or hospitals. Your problem is because you have not invested well in piping your waters to your homesteads. So what does Latif and Janet do? They come with their money, they build us hospitals.
And they continue defecating.
They continue defecating. They pipe our waters to our homesteads, but still the problem persists. What happens to the community? In the long run, the downstream communities literally die off because of lack of stopping it at the source. What Janet and Latif could have done is they know their responsibility. They are coming and lying to these people at the grassroots level. What they need to do is stop defecating and literally take care of the environment from the source. Because whereas you're defecating and really always having safe, clean water, your defecation is going into the grassroots, the downstreams, and they are bearing the effects. Now, that is the same case with carbon market.
I'm not mad at that analogy.
And to whoever,
literally what it is.
Yes.
and to whoever has ears, let him hear, and let whoever has a brain to think about that.
Yeah.
That's what I've been saying on this whole thing. Let us establish a coal plant.
No, this is not
Oh,
where
you're
we're
gonna go
going.
back.
That's not.
Let's see if I was in that campaign. Don't take me back to those
Let us
days.
establish that thing in Lamu.
When you're in a state
Okay.
of being angry and saying, "Sour, what we'll do," Mariam is like, that
Okay.
doesn't help.
Our coal plant will, science has shown, it's contributing a negligible amount of carbon into the atmosphere. Without it, we don't have power. With it, we increase our power. And we are able to industrialize. And we're able to start catching up. Those guys have their coal plants.
Still running it.
And with it, they are coming to give us flocker money.
So Latif, to me, stupidity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I'll shock you by telling you that scientifically, there is an allowable limit to which we can survive in the planet without the worsening impacts of the climate crisis. That number has been put at 350 parts per million. You'll be surprised that today, as of May 2025, that number has shot to over 430 parts per million. Now, if we just pass by 1 part per million, that is a lot of carbon emitted to the atmosphere. So imagine if we have, how many years will it take us to actually get from 430 to 350, which is a safe numbers or carbon emission threshold that we can actually safely live under. You know, so if we are to think of investments, I know and I am convinced we have better alternatives. We have really available options like wind, solar, geothermal that Kenya is really growing, and actually
Hydroelectric.
Hydroelectric. And right now, as you look at our Kenyan nationally determined contribution 3, right now we are actually committing to be 100% renewable energy powered by when? 2035. So the question is this. So then, even as we are talking about low carbon development pathway, where is the place of coal? Do you want to go back to obsolete power? Do we want, even as we talk about having contributed to negligible amounts of climate crisis, still do what the global north are doing and still on the sidelines keep on demanding that they have to then finance us? Are we not literally drinking or preaching water and drinking wine?
No, we are not. They are the ones that are doing that.
So I think
They are the ones that are
I
pushing
feel
that
like we are
campaign
in
that,
a new...
don't establish. But they are not
For
shutting down theirs.
us, the people are, look at it this way, Latif, we have not been responsible for the climate crisis, but who are the people feeling the brunt of the climate crisis? It's our own communities, it's us.
Yeah.
So, and that's why I'm saying, instead of then going in the same pathway that these global north or developed countries used to really develop, the question should shift to reparations. Can you pay us for avoided emissions?
Right.
Can you pay us for not investing in our coal plant? Can you pay us for the damage that you've caused to our ecosystems? And can you ensure there's enough resourcing to support our communities to cushion themselves from the impacts of the climate crisis? Because, mark my words, if we choose to go on this pathway, we will for sure develop. But does 2 wrongs make a right?
No.
It does not. So we really need to be the custodians of nature, of restoration, and looking at the opportunity. Let's look at the opportunity to really develop renewable energy sources and really lead a really low carbon economy, and an economy that is not based on capitalism. Because the other enemy is capitalism. We need to really think about, and I have this book, sorry, it's called Donut
to develop
Economics.
that wind power, for us to develop geothermal, we need industrialization. Right now, we don't own any of the IP that is giving us this geothermal. We are buying equipment from abroad. Even drilling, we can't even make our own bolts for drilling that thing on the ground. We are importing it. Solar, we import those big turbines to go and set up our solar plants, and wind power plants, turbines and all. We are all doing that. Can they pay us reparations? Yes. Their justification for continuing to pay us reparations is they've got to continue doing what they're doing.
No.
And that is why we need to have
Let
this
us be
conversation.
independent.
Latif, that is why it's very important. Number one, negotiation is a very tricky and at times disappointing process because it takes long. And I understand where you're coming from. Really, we need to be a city where we are even having very serious mobility and transport in our urban centers. We need to have a system where I don't have to really worry about not getting water to really bathe in the morning before I go to work. We need to have systems where even communication is really very prompt because development is needed. But I feel then for us to be more responsible, we have to think about what choices are we making today? And then what is the future that we are creating for other people? If there is an opportunity I can talk about today and submit is that we need to really support innovations. We need to really support local innovations. Think about the power of the youth. Think about what we can do to really create these locally assembled cars. Think about manufacturing these solar panels. Think about really investing in our youth because think about
how to skip a step.
Exactly.
Because I know what Latif is saying, and it's okay to skip a step. In the journey of industrialization, they went through this and they went through coal. They
went through dirty coal.
Dirty coal, clean coal.
We can go through cleaner coal.
No, we can skip the whole coal step. We can skip the whole coal
and
step.
go where?
We have options.
To whatever is next.
Which is?
Geothermal power.
Okay.
So
how do we get our geothermal?
And that's what I'm saying, Latif, we need to think, what are the, of course we have failed at this, and when it comes to the negotiations,
please develop
it's not
science that can get for us geothermal from the ground.
And
we
like
should be having our own industries here that are able to actually develop the machinery for drilling geothermal.
And that is why the role of innovation is very important, honestly. Think about our education system. At times you're taught to just theoretically cram something so that you can pass. But then what community and society are we creating if we just teach people to theorize everything just for the sake of passing exams? We need to have more resource hubs, innovation hubs, where we allow creators to actually go and think, contribute to ideas. Think about this creative economy. How do we really support our young people to think about solutions? And like Mariam is saying, skip a step, think outside of the box and really work to create a new economy, because if capitalism is anything to go by, let me tell you, many of us will remain unemployed and we still want to use obsolete energies models to really power economy, but we'll achieve the same results, trust you me. We'll be in a chaotic environment and we will wish we went back to years where we could have innovated and financed creativity from the community to really deliver solutions that we need at our doorsteps.
Wow. Very interesting. It's not too late. Sometimes I have to just remind myself, okay, the solutions are here. I'm talking about increased deforestation and encroachment of forests like Gong and Karua. I think that's concerning. Number one, what's going on? Number two, what can be done to defend some of these really critical ecosystems?
Yeah. Janet, as you pose that question, I'm reminded of the arrested soldier, the late Professor Wangari Maathai. You know, she said that unless you take a tree, you dig a hole, you plant that tree, you take care of it to its maturity, you've not done a thing, you're just talking. And many of us today are just talking. I mean, a lot of people claim that they planted millions of trees, and you go to the grassroots, there's nothing that is happening.
Billions are incoming.
Exactly. And then we look at the very remaining few green resources, the green forests that we have in this city that are now at the, facing the risk of being cleared. Think of Karura. Right now we've had trees being felled, and then we are being told that, some of these are exotic and then these are commercial forests. So at times you have to cut down so that we can, and then it's like based on that, CFA or Community Forest Association model, where they have to cut it after some years so that they can make room for, restoration of other trees. I ask myself, who are we lying to? Who are we lying to? And to whose benefit is the cutting of these trees? Because we've not had a proper, public participation in this. If you look at the example of the Ngong Road Forest, I mean, if it was not for groups like the Green Belt Movement and active citizens bringing it to limelight, right now there would be very nice buildings being, constructed. And if you look keenly, it's some powerful person, in leadership somewhere who has literally taken advantage of the opportunity of their role in government or in leadership positions to go and destroy a pristine ecosystem. What I feel should be done is we need to guard these green spaces as though our lives depend on it, because our lives depend on them. Karura would not be Karura as it is if it was not for warriors like Wangari Maathai back in the days. Ngong Road Forest, the same case. We need to be the Wangari Maathais of today, and we need to really see them as our urban lungs. We need to see them as centers of resilience and well-being. There's so many of us who are stressed. And to make matters a nail to the coffin, it even becomes more expensive to access these parks, you know? Yeah. So, and maybe it goes to Lati's point, to whose benefit is the conservation anyway. So are we just conserving to then, let tourists access it and then make it very exclusionary for our local people? And I feel we should not be doing that. Let us make this open for people. Let us create really participatory models for them to enjoy these parks, because it is only when people value and know the worth of the ecosystem that they can put in measures and participate in its conservation. That is a challenge to our government, our leaders, both in civil society and at the community level, to really see this for the opportunity that it has, and really take care of the environment. We have the 15 billion
trees
challenge by 2035, yeah? 2030, yeah? And that is supposed to contribute to about 32% forest cover across the country. Yes. So if we are currently cutting down the forests,
how do we get there?
Exactly. How do we get there? How are we even committing to curbing and cutting down on emissions that we are emitting as a country? So for me, I think there's a lot that we need to think about, and we need to, what I said, walk the talk. Let's not preach water and drink wine.
What do you think of the taxation measures that have been taken that seem like they're in line with our global climate change agenda? Yeah, but for most people, they just feel like, you're just coming for me. Whether it's taxing of, not plastics, what are they called?
Fuel.
Fuel, yes, that's a good one, fuel. But there's also a lot of the raw materials that go into creating things like sanitary pads, etc., heavily taxed. And you're like, okay, that's part of the climate agenda, but core ground, I could barely afford it before. Now, now it's even worse.
I feel like...
Oh, yes, and vehicles, the new...
The electric vehicles?
Yes, the
levy?
The levies, but we do seem to, of course, punish when you buy older, which is ideally a move for the environment.
Yeah.
We should leapfrog, Mariam. Buy new cars.
Yes, but the taxation on new cars is still ridiculous, so it doesn't make sense. And electric vehicles are the ones you should tax less.
What I think is this: taxes are important to power a country and to help us develop. But if I'm to be the preacher of the gospel, is that at times these taxes have been used to punish the ordinary citizen. They'd be used to abate us and really, harbor us from exploring our potential to develop as a country. And even as I think about some of these fuel levies, about taxation on electric vehicles and a lot of, these sectors, I feel like it might not, it's a good idea, but then where is it founded on? Last year we were told that we love to, live under these austerity measures, to live within our means. But every day we are also aware and witnesses to how much money is being lost to corruption and bribery. So if anything, I feel we should not add to the tax burden on the ordinary citizens. In fact, if we are talking about the green just transition, the best option would be like remove some of these taxes from the citizens. In fact, for the NGO sector right now, there's a tax as well. You're supposed to now pay something. And remember, the civil society is one of the key actors who are helping to contribute to development at the local level. They are helping to actually resource and finance locally led solutions for climate, for communities, and for food systems. But then they're now again being taxed. So how is that creating an enabling environment for them to really thrive and contribute to our national economy? So in my submission, I think we should rethink our tax burdens and really offset this burden from the ordinary Kenyan.
Right.
And really make it possible for us to contribute to the national building that we are committing to.
I mean, I'd love to see a future where electric vehicles attract significantly less tax, or hybrid at least. I've said that over and over. And over again. Sorry?
Yes.
We will, yes. And the fact that we are moving sort of to just like, it's this old, it's that old, it costs this much, the engine capacity. I'm like, where does this fall in your agenda? And it speaks to that disconnect that I often see between policy and implementation. And I know we've talked about it a little bit, but is there a fix for making this policy and kwa ground,
and practice, yeah?
Yes.
Policy and practice. One, I think, just to respond to your previous point, Mariam, I think it's fair for us to also tax older models, because one thing we have witnessed, and I was...
Oh, no, I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
They emit more, the longer cars on the road.
And also what we have seen is now the West and the industrialized countries are seeing this as an opportunity to dump cars.
Yes.
And it also happened in the plastic sector, actually.
Yes.
In 2020-2021, they had this whole, the American chemistry chamber actually had a whole agreement with the then president, Uhuru, to then create a quote-unquote market for Africa through exporting plastics, because they thought that will create employment for our youth. It will support us to really lead in the plastic transition in Africa. So what we did, we actually went and sued them, and we really launched a whole campaign. And we wrote a letter to the US Senate. A few senators and a few congressmen and women signed to it, and that deal was cut off. Of course, the government denied it in the long run, but we saw that, they had to really call it off.
Right.
And so for me, I feel we need to think about the ramifications of some of these policies. Policy, I always say that policy is a function of organizing and not the other way around. It's because of organizing that policies get to serve us. It's not because of policy making that we have to organize.
Right.
And we have to see that role, that it's the people, it's the community who influence this policy making. So let's not go as leaders, as government, as institutions, forcing some policies that are not speaking to the ground. Let us have consultative processes. Let us engage Mwananchi. And let us make sure we speak to the issues that are affecting them on a daily basis.
All right. We have to wrap up there, like we're completely out of time. But I think it's a conversation that we've just started, but we need to pull at so many of these threads. All the things that we have touched on deserve an hour on their own. Yeah. And I think we'll just have to have him back.
Coal too.
Coal, 2 hours, and nuclear. 1 hour coal, 1 hour nuclear. But of course, we've been with Paul Mutuku. He is, of course, a youth climate advocate, talking to us about, the World Environment Day as we mark it today, what it means, how we're marking it, how we should be marking it, progress made, and some of the not so progressive things that have happened. But thank you so much, Paul. We have to wrap up now. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back here tomorrow, 6 to 10 a.m. for another amazing edition of Fixing the Nation. Be sure to send your WhatsApp Nation, ndio kesho ni play yako for a change. Sindio, not just someone else's, yours. Sawa basi. I'll see you.
That's good. Thank you. Do you know June is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month? Oh. Sikujua.
That's amazing. I did not know
so
that.
we'll talk a little bit about it tomorrow.
There's a lot
Mr. Man on the panel.
There's a lot we don't know.
It was apparently from 1994. Sikujua. Sawa. As Mariam said, all she said, we repeat. Same. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to all our guests. Have a good one.